braving the weather and coming out this morning. Our first effort of the orientation for small cities with work in the Transportation Policy Council. This kind of got started when I was appointed to the Transportation Policy Council. I knew less about it than probably most of you guys. And I found that when I tried to talk to small cities about it, I represent small cities, Harris County small cities on the Transportation Policy Council. So when I tried to talk to small cities about it, what I could do to help them, they didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue. So I went to Alan and told Alan what my problem was. He suggested that we have a meeting, an orientation with small cities. And I appreciate you coming. Two things. One, you're going to get a lot out of this information. The other thing is you're going to be able to put some faces with the names you read. And when you call in to somebody, you can call and ask for a name, not ask for a transportation policy. The other thing is, I think it will give them a little better grasp of the small cities. We don't have a lot this time, part of the rain, part of it is something new. I think if we do this a few more times, we'll see, when you guys go back and say you got something out of it, we'll see the numbers go up. But we're going to learn a lot today. We're going to keep it short. Alex said we can do it in an hour, and any questions from you guys, we'll take an hour as long as you guys want. Any questions? If you've got specific projects in your specific city, that probably wouldn't be interesting to everybody. I asked you to wait and hold and get the form after the meeting, so you talk to the residents. That way we get these pretty fast. My councilwoman, Joan Johnson, is here. She knows I am a strict, run meetings very strictly, so we'll be done pretty quickly. But to start off, let's just kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves. We'll start over there and come this way.
My name is Jeff Kaufman. I'm a staff member here who deals with operations, safety, and money, I guess.
I'm Karen Glenn. I'm the city administrator for Bunker Hill Village.
Murad Kabiri, the assistant city manager for City of Friendswood.
My name is Shelley Whitworth, and I'm the air quality program manager here at H-GAC.
David Wardlow, again, transportation program manager, mostly on the short range planning and the TIP process.
Ashby Johnson, I'm the deputy director for transportation.
I'm Alan Clark, I'm the Director of Transportation.
Chuck Wimple, Chief Operating Officer at HGAC.
Good day. Bob Fry, Mayor of Western Mercy Place. Representatives of the Transportation Policy Council for Harris County Small Cities.
Glenn Royal, Mayor Seabrook.
Joan Johnson, City Council, West University.
George Shackelford, City Manager in Colorado.
My name is Paula Alexander. I'm with the law firm Olson. We represent a lot of small cities, but I'm also a 30-year past employee of the Metropolitan Transit Authority. So transportation is a part of me and always will be. Anything I can do to represent our small city clients, I'm here to learn more.
I'm Mary Hammer Menzel, MHM Consultants, and I came just to see what the small cities are doing.
I'm Roger Menzel. Along with her.
Mayor, if you don't mind, let me also ask Lucinda Martinez to stand up. Lucinda is my administrative assistant.
Yes, she's back.
When you call me, you're most likely to get her.
One last thing, if you want to get up, go get coffee, go to the bathroom, get up, because that's what I'll be doing.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and I sure appreciate your time this morning. We're going to get right down to business. We want to talk with you about what the transportation planning and programming activities here at HJC are all about, but most importantly, how you can participate in those. And we really do want your participation and your interest. Karen used to be with the city of Sugar Land. I think she probably knows a little bit from her experience there. But we realize that sometimes this can be a very challenging topic. But some of you have heard horror stories about being engaged with some of our transportation partners like the Texas Department of Transportation. And we're looking for ways to break those barriers down and give you an opportunity to address the transportation needs in your community. You are many times in the middle of a very large urban area. That means your transportation needs are no smaller than those of the city of Houston Harris County or anybody else, because that traffic doesn't realize whether they're in Bunker Hill or whether they're in the city of Houston, but you have to deal with the issues. So we certainly want to give you an opportunity to take advantage of any of the resources here at HGAC. In this great big old packet, we're not going to go through all the material in here, but we did give you the names of the elected officials and transportation agencies that are on our Transportation Policy Council, like Mayor Fry. He has opened the door, and I know he will be happy to help connect you to HGAC and any of the resources we have, or for that matter, other transportation agencies. And then in the presentation material, you'll see email addresses and phone numbers for some of the key staff that you'll be hearing from here from HGAC. Please feel free to talk to them directly if you wish to do so, or to call me or send me an email as well. I will say that we have, although there is a cycle to some of the funding decisions we have, your transportation needs are what you have on your plate today, and new things are happening tomorrow. So please don't hesitate to talk to us, whether or not you think there is a current funding opportunity, because we really can't begin soon enough. One of the last things I wanted to share is that we are looking to help you create partnerships, whether that's with us or another transportation agency, or whether it's just your neighbor next door. We can often get a lot more done when we work together. So, for example, I know some of you have been told that your transportation need was so small that the process of getting things contracted with TxDOT and administered through the state was going to cost you more money than if you just fixed it yourself. But we have worked in situations where we had 2 or 3 or more local governments who had similar needs, whether they're on the same or different transportation corridors, tried to bundle those together into a single project where we can share in those kind of administrative issues and be effective in helping to bring some federal or state transportation funding to the issue. Similarly, Metro has been a great partner with our local governments. We don't have transportation agencies here today, but we are certainly glad to make sure that any of your concerns, we get those connected to them. With that, we're going to go forward with giving you an overview. The first part is the only part that really sounds like you're going to class, so I ask your forbearance with that. But we do want you to understand a little bit about state and federal transportation funding and the role we play in that. So I'm going to have Ashby Johnson, my Deputy Director, walk you through some introduction to the MPO process. In his former lifetime, Ashby worked with the Federal Highway Administration and with the Texas Department of Transportation, so it's a real privilege for us to have him. Ashby.
Thank you, Alan. The way we've structured the information this morning is I'm going to give you sort of a broad overview of the process and how we do things here at HGAC, and then Shelley and David and Jeff will give you a little more specific information on key topics. So with that, I'm going to jump in, but before I start, if you've got questions about something that I'm talking about or any of the other presenters, just stop us while we're going along, and we'll be happy to answer the questions. I don't want you to have to wait till the end to try to remember what you were thinking about. So we'll just stop. You won't bother us at all.
And we do have both a printed copy of all the slides we're going to be using this morning in your packet, and then they'll be showing up there on the screen.
Okay, the first slide you see here is a graphical representation of our Metropolitan Transportation Planning Organization. You will hear me refer to it as the MPO as we go forward through the presentation this morning. Our MPO is 8 counties, including Harris and the 7 surrounding counties. You see that here on the slide. We currently have a population of roughly 6 million people in the MPO right now, and we cover about 8,000 square miles. There are about 300 or so organizations similar to ours across the country. In terms of those organizations, we are the 4th largest in the country, and we may be growing soon because there's some interest from one of our outer counties to join in. So with that, what exactly is an MPO? Metropolitan planning organizations, they were established in federal law in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and they were really established as a response to some of the more negative externalities that happened during the construction of the interstate highway system that started in the 1950s. In some cases, in many cities across the country, there were instances where neighborhoods were split apart by freeways or destroyed altogether. And the MPOs were created as a forum for the local elected officials in those communities to come together and to first coordinate transportation activities, but also to try to see can't they stem some of those negative externalities so that the use of the public money in the future as going forward, where you benefited as many people as possible and impacted negatively as few people as possible. So that's really what we do, is we provide a forum for people like you to come in and to hear about what's going on across the region and to provide input to us and to help us shape the priorities and the goals for long-range transportation planning in this region. So let me take a minute to distinguish between the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is also called H-GAC, and H-GAC, which is the Council of Governments. The biggest difference is that we cover 8 counties. The Council of Governments covers 13 counties. The Council of Governments, while we are housed within them, their duties are a little bit different than ours. They cover things such as workforce, which many of you may be familiar with, water quality issues, cooperative purchasing, which I'm sure many of you have had some experience with as well. We only deal with transportation on our side, and we cover the 8 counties, as I said to you before. The Council of Governments, however, does serve as our fiscal agent, which means that if we are going to enter into a contract with someone, we run those contracts past the H-GAC COG board for approval. Having said that, the Metropolitan Planning Organization does have a separate board, different from the Council of Governments board. It's called the Transportation Policy Council, and I'm going to get right to that to give you a little more information on here. The Policy Council is composed of local elected officials here in our region, some people that are appointed, and then we have major modes of transportation on the Policy Council, such as Metro, and we have one state elected official who serves in a ex officio capacity. Right now it is Representative Fletcher, and we also have some positions that are at-large positions that are filled by residents of the region. We also have, as sort of technical support to the Policy Council advisory committees, such as the Technical Advisory Committee, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and then us as staff. As far as the Policy Council is one member from each of the 8 counties as a voting member. Then we have the cities that also over 50,000 that have voting membership. Right now, those cities are Houston, Sugar Land, Pasadena, Galveston, and before anybody says something, I know Galveston's below 50,000 population right now, but we grandfather them because of the provisions of our organizing documents. Baytown, Texas City, and Missouri City. And then as far as the smaller cities are concerned, as you heard earlier, Mayor Fry is a representative for U.S. smaller cities right now. We also have positions on our Policy Council for the railroads. There is one position on for them. We also have a position on for the Gulf Coast Rail District. We have voting membership for Metro. Then we have, in addition to the legislative person that I mentioned to you earlier, we have ex officio positions for the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. And also the Greater Houston Partnership has an ex officio position.
One thing, real quick, Alan, you guys passed out a list of the acronyms that was extremely helpful trying to figure out what everybody was doing. Could Lucinda make a copy of that and hand it out to you? I didn't see that in practice.
I believe we have that. Let's see, there's a document. Here we go. There is this document, I'm sorry, called the Transportation Planning Process Key Issues. And I believe the thing you're referring to is in the back of that. There's a whole list of abbreviations in those last few pages.
Okay, good.
But I will have to say, you could probably make sure it's got all the kinds of things we need, but I think that's a good starting place. This is a federal document, actually, to refer to it. I do want to, yeah, okay, that's fine, go ahead.
Alan just reminded me that we changed the bylaws for the Transportation Policy Council last year, late last year, and the ex officio positions for federal highway and federal transit are no longer part of the GHP or the partnership.
Yeah. The only ex officio members we have are for a rail position. That's currently the only one we have.
And the other transportation interest.
That is actually a voting position.
In terms of what the Policy Council does, and first let me say that when you hear folks talk about the MPO, the Policy Council really is the MPO. It's not us, the staff. It's the decision-making body that is really the MPO. And what the Policy Council does is they implement the vision and the goals for long-range transportation planning in our region. They set the priorities, and they do that through a number of tools, for lack of a better word. You will see the main tools that we use to do that is the Regional Transportation Plan, and I'll talk about that in a few more minutes. We also do that through the Transportation Improvement Program and through the commissioning of several different kinds of planning studies. You'll hear me talk a little bit later on about sub-regional plans and thoroughfare plans and those kinds of things. We use all of that to feed into our long-range transportation planning, and we use that to help the Transportation Policy Council set priority. One of the things that we also do as the Policy Council is we set what's called purpose and need. And you'll hear, as local governments, purpose and need talked about in the environmental documents that we have to prepare for major projects. Purpose and need is what it sounds like. You have to tell the federal government as you're using federal money just exactly what is that project going to accomplish and what's the federal interest in that project. And we try to establish purpose and need on the planning side up front in our documentation that we do here rather than wait much later on, so the public has a chance to see and comment on it before it gets to the phase where their public input would not have as much impact as it came in earlier. Also, in addition to the Transportation Policy Council, we have what's called the Technical Advisory Committee. And the Technical Advisory Committee is a subcommittee to the Policy Council. It is there to advise them on policy in some cases, but more on the technical side of what we do. So as MPO staff, we spend a lot of time, all month, every month, working with our Technical Advisory Committee members. And the way the Technical Advisory Committee members are appointed to the body is all of the counties have an appointment they make to the body, as well as the cities. And then we have at-large positions on the Technical Advisory Committee as well. So you, as smaller cities, could have the opportunity to provide input and have an impact through the appointment of members to the Technical Advisory Committee. One of the really big things that we do here is we develop the Transportation Improvement Program, and that Transportation Improvement Program is a subset of our long-range transportation plan. The Transportation Improvement Program is the first 4 years of the long-range plan. It's the money, it's the action part of the plan. What we do, we have to do what we call a call for projects on that. And once we get the projects, we have to go through and vet them and put them through a objective process so that everybody has a fair chance at the money. What we do with TAC, and we have to come up with criteria. And TAC helps us quite a bit on developing criteria that we use for project review and selection. And then once we've gone through the TAC and the subcommittees for looking at those projects, the TAC, if they feel that it's warranted, will make a recommendation to the Policy Council to select a program of activities to use the federal funding and the state funding that we have available here in this region.
Ashby, let me ask you a quick question. How much of the project started the TAC versus what comes from the TPC?
I'm sorry, Mayor?
Does sometimes the TPC come up with their own ideas? Does everything have to be vetted through the TAC?
Pretty much everything comes up through the TAC.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Everybody submits.
Let me say that the funding for transportation projects is a shared responsibility. There are projects that are selected at a federal level based upon a federal competitive process. If we go back a ways, and all of us are probably old enough to remember this, there was a time when individual representatives in Congress could, through legislative action, earmark money for particular projects. We had a different name for it than earmark, I guess. It sounded less polite, didn't we? But now, most of these funds are awarded competitively. The Texas Transportation Commission, the policy body for TxDOT, also makes selections on projects. Regardless of who is selecting the project, those projects will still have to be consistent with our regional transportation plan. And our Transportation Policy Council does have a veto. It can say no. It's seldom done because normally the transportation agencies are working cooperatively with us. They know what our needs are. Our federal and state elected officials are aware too. But there have been instances, very few of them, where the Policy Council said, no, this is not what our local governments want. That's one of their jobs, is to ensure that. And I would say that whenever there are disputes over transportation projects with local governments, the Policy Council wants to make sure before they move forward that we have attempted to satisfactorily resolve those. So, the process Ashby's describing, normally the Policy Council says, these are the important considerations we want you to make. The Technical Advisory Committee translates that into things that we can assign score points to. And so we can objectively compare one project to another.
Mayor, I think part of what you've seen, especially in the last year or so, is the MPO, we have two categories of funds that we're responsible, that we, the TPC, are responsible for programming. One is called Surface Transportation Program, Metro Mobility. The other is called Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, you just refer to as CMAQ. Those are sub-allocated to us from the federal government through TxDOT, and TPC is responsible for programming that funding. However, TxDOT still has state funding that they control, and they have some federal funding that they also control, that the commissioners can award projects based on their own discretion. And in some cases, you're seeing those projects coming in as well. So I thought, once I heard you again, that that's kind of what you might have been getting at. So I thought, then, as far as staff is concerned, our role is to provide technical analysis and to assist the local governments. With that, we also prepare the long-range transportation plan, the Unified Planning Work Program, and the Transportation Improvement Program. And our biggest job is to really assist in fostering the dialogue among all of you in the region so we can coordinate. And then we manage the day-to-day activities of the planning process. The major work products you will see us produce, as I said to you before, the Unified Planning Work Program, and then the Long Range Transportation Plan, which is a 20-year minimum planning horizon, and then the Transportation Improvement Program, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then, as I said to you earlier, some of the other things that we also do in addition to those documents, or as supplements to those documents, our corridor studies, such as you've heard folks, I'm sure, talk about in the past few years. I-69, that was a big corridor study that we were very active on with Texas Department of Transportation. You may hear more in the future about things like State Highway 36A, which is another corridor study we may be kicking off, or the Port Connector study, Mayor Oil, that would be a little bit of 146. Then we also have a regional goods movement plan that we just finished and we're going to start implementing soon, and would have implications for almost all of you in the room. And then on the operations side, that's more of trying to see, can we get more out of the existing system without having to add capacity? And then lastly, we do a lot with our public transit organizations, not just Metro, but also Fort Bend County Transit, Harris County Transit, Harris County Rides, and then there's a lot of nonprofits that provide transportation as well, and we work with all of them to see can we effectively coordinate and provide service to the public. Now, just a little bit about the federal aid program, and you will hear people refer to some of what we do as the federal aid program, either federal aid highway or federal aid in general. The federal aid program is quite simply the money that flows through, but it's a reimbursable program. That's the thing I really wanted you to walk away with. You don't, if you ask for project funding, you don't get the project funding up front. You have to put your money up front, and then you get reimbursed once the expenditure's been made. Also, federal funds have to be what we call matched. Normally what happens is the federal portion of the dollar will pay for 80% of the project cost, and the other 20% has to come from local sources, either from you as local governments or you and the state in some cases. In some rare instances, it is possible to get more than 80% federal funding, but those are very rare instances. And in all cases, on the federal side of the dollar, any project activities or program activities have to be coordinated through the MPO and with the TxDOT. In terms of public comment, everything we do here is open to the public. All of our policy council meetings and our technical advisory committee meetings are open to the public. And we also hold public meetings on every major document and activity that we do. So you'll see public meetings for the plan, for the TIP, for the UPWP. You'll see them for the planning study that we do. We're holding public meetings all the time. This is a great way for you as local governments to become involved in what we do and provide us input. Either you as the elected representatives or the city managers or your residents as well. And with that, I'm going to stop and see if we have any questions. You can find, we have a whole lot of information on our website. It's quite dense, I will warn you, but the website is here. And if you want to find out what we're doing in terms of public meetings or what we're working on currently, the website is a great way to do that. You can also give us a call. We'll be happy to answer any questions or come out and visit if you need us to come out and visit. But with that, I'm going to stop and see if we have any questions, and if not, then I'm going to move over to
One quick
Yes,
question I have. The reimbursement program that you just described, is there a situation where, say, a city does a bonding in order to do construction of frontage road, then come back and ask for the reimbursement, where we can take those funds and put them in escrow to pay off that bond?
But I'll answer it maybe a little different way. Sometimes the federal funding commitment can be part of your bond package. When you've got a federal funding commitment, you can say, gosh, we're going to get paid back by the feds. That's been done. There are also other ways to help back your debt. I mean, for example, one way is to not sell bonds, and instead, if you were going to be able to pay this back from federal funds anyway, use something like the State Infrastructure Bank. But and if you're not familiar with that, we again would be happy to talk to you about that. I think the key is that before you spend your local money, you must generally have a project agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation. So I would want to make sure that before you make your investment, you've talked with TxDOT, you've got your project funding agreement. It is generally, if you spend money in advance of the project and the project agreement, TxDOT says, good boy, that project now costs me less, and that reduces what you're going to get from us. So you want to be sure and get that done first. Okay, let's go to David Wardlow. We've talked some about the money. Now we're going to talk about how money gets to projects, and that's called the Transportation Improvement Program. And that'll be the next presentation in your handout slides.
Thanks. And again, we're going to walk through the TIP process here and then spend a little bit of time giving you all an opportunity where we're going to highlight some opportunities we would see for small cities in particular to take advantage of this process and the programs that we have, and see if you have any questions from there. Again, this has been teed up pretty well, so we'll be able to speed through some of these first slides pretty quickly. Again, as Ashby noted, the TIP, or Transportation Improvement Program, is a 4-year program of projects, and it's really the front end of what he described as our regional transportation plan. So it takes the policies and the objectives and the outcomes that we want to see in our long-range transportation plan and starts assigning funding commitments to implement and see those objectives come to pass. It is multimodal, it is multi-jurisdictional, and as it notes there, it's not just federal funds. That is a key component of the TIP, certainly, but it does also include a program of projects that are locally funded or by the state that are regionally significant. Really, it's trying to communicate to the public how are we going to get this grand vision of a regional transportation plan to come about. That's not just paid for with federal money, as we all know. It relies a lot on other resources. Again, the document is approved by the Transportation Policy Council. Just as a point of reference for you all, you also hear us talking about the STIP, that is the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, and our TIP basically just gets rolled up with all the other urban TIPs, and the state is responsible for all the rural areas. It all just gets rolled up into one giant statewide TIP. And just for your reference, the federal government doesn't approve our plan, they don't approve our TIP, but they do approve some of the follow-on things like the STIP. And it's that STIP approval that is required before they can approve an environmental document or authorize the use of funds or things like that. So it's kind of one of those multi-layered things where there's a lot of local control on the front end, but the federal government makes sure on the back end that they're making sure that all the requirements are being met before they authorize some activity to occur. Again, why are y'all here? Probably to listen to us. In some cases, it's all about the money. So how do we get there? The call for projects process is an ongoing process. We typically conduct a call about every 2 years. But again, these are TPC selected projects and programs. As Ashby noted, there are a lot of other programs. There are a lot of other projects that might come in through other mechanisms, be they selected by Congress directly, by USDOT, through the Tiger program, you might have heard that, and all the other kind of ways. Our call for projects is specifically for the funds that Policy Council controls, and they get to direct the use of those. Okay, so it's TPC selected. There is a formal application and evaluation process that I'm going to walk through in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. And just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, we kind of have been into those projects that you might think of submitting into various categories so that we can evaluate them. In our previous 2 calls, we've used, for most of the projects, they fall into these 3 categories listed: mobility, which would be mostly adding capacity roadway projects, our major interchange or intersection projects, things like that. Our alternative modes, which is going to include transit and related investments, bicycle pedestrian investments. So if we wanted to do a hike and bike trail that connects to areas where there may be employment centers or something like that, it would fall there. As well as our Livable Centers Initiative program. You might have heard of that before, which is really trying to focus on the interaction between land use and transportation a little more closely. Those are all alternative modes. And we also go into planning and preliminary engineering type activities, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that in a moment too. We do expect our next call to occur this coming spring. We'll be working with our advisory committee and the TPC over the next, from now until then, setting up for that. There have been a lot of changes in federal statutes with our surface transportation legislation that was passed last year, and our interpretation of it. So how are we going to implement that? So we're working on a new long-range plan. We've got all kinds of new stuff coming. We've got to figure out how we want to operationalize that and make funding decisions based on it. So we're going to spend the next 6 months getting ready for that, but in the spring is when we'll be coming out to local sponsors and saying, hey, we're ready for you to submit an application based on the new criteria. Just as the overall process, again, this is a pretty streamlined, very kind of linear representation. There's usually a lot of loops in here, backwards and forwards that go along with any kind of committee process. But generally speaking, we work with our policy council and the subcommittees thereof to develop some project evaluation criteria, and what we're going to do over the next 6 months. We initiate that call for projects. We receive the applications and begin review. We work with our subcommittees to determine if there are any issues that need to be resolved before we then go out through the selection process and then bring it out to the public. We should probably definitely have a little box there for public comment in there before we get to TAC and TPC approval. A little bit about the criteria. Again, this is based on our previous experience, but I would expect going forward it'll fall roughly in this kind of framework too. We looked at both benefit cost, a very objective kind of look at projects. This is usually looking at how much can we reduce delay for vehicles or the traveling public by making a project investment, or how much emissions can we reduce in our area. We are a non-attainment area. Shelley's going to speak a lot more about that, but it is a very key component of what we do. So those are the kind of the very hard kind of criteria that we're going to look at. We also look at planning factors, which often seem a little more fluffy, but they're just as important. There may be some design criteria that we're interested in, safety aspects of a project, all those kind of things that come into play in a decision that we may not have a direct monetary number assigned to them, but we want to make sure they're part of the decision-making process. So that gives you a real high-level overview. I would say one thing that may be important for you guys to consider, I'll back up just a little bit. We relied much more heavily on local sponsors to produce a lot of this information in our calls that we had maybe 4 or 5 cycles ago. I would imagine that will continue. So please make sure you remain engaged in this process so you have a better understanding of what's going to be required when you submit a project. There are lots of folks that can give you help, including us, through that process. And we always are striving to make sure that it's not an onerous process, but we want to make sure we have the right information available to the decision makers. And we're not just picking projects that are somebody's wish, for example. We got to make sure everybody's done their due diligence. We understand what the impacts of a project might be, what the benefits might be before we commit funding to it. Again, opportunities for small cities. The big one that Alan hit on right off the bat, partnerships. It's all about partnerships for y'all. And the big one's going to be bundling of projects. Particularly, for example, we might do a lot of ITS investment on a corridor, for example. It might go through 3 or 4 jurisdictions. We all can team up and determine that we want to make a corridor approach to it. That's how we really like to do ITS projects, to get regional bang out of the investment. But we recognize it might go through multiple jurisdictions. That's just one example. There are lots that could come into play. Again, you can always participate financially in a bigger project. The one I'll throw out there that did come to us as a partnership, but we on the backside we were like, hey, that could be kind of interesting. Memorial reconstruction that the City of Houston presented in our last call and was funded, in fact, by the Policy Council. Well, there's no reason why that couldn't have extended further with a partnership with another small city or something, for example. The other area is programmatic funding. So there are certain areas where we commit funding to achieve a certain objective, and we're not picking specific implementation actions at the time we commit the funding. This happens a lot in our air quality programs, and Shelley's going to walk you through all those. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but for example, replacing vehicles for cleaner engines, that kind of thing. You can come back through a separate application process that's maybe a little more friendly to y'all. It's not going to be quite the competitive process that goes into the tip call. And there's a lot more support to that application. But there are a lot of programs that you can avail yourselves of that aren't going to be, putting a big application into the tip project and competing with all the major cities and counties. Same kind of thing on our planning programs. We have, as I mentioned, the Local Centers Initiative program that's looking at particularly small areas for how we can leverage investments in transportation to induce the development outcomes that we're trying to achieve as small cities or smaller areas. Our access management program, again, looking at a corridor, how can we improve safety and accessibility throughout that corridor and while maintaining mobility. We have a sub-regional initiative program that again looks at something smaller than our 8-county area to focus on a particular issue. Sometimes that's a county-wide transportation plan. Sometimes that's something like, say we're about to wrap up the next couple of months looking at bicycle and transit use so it's a Metro bike and ride study. So what improvements can we make that allow people to interface with the transit system throughout the Metro service area, and what improvements can we do to enhance that through bicycle. So a bunch of different planning programs, but again, you can apply to us and speak with us about things you might want to achieve. And that's going to be outside of the TIP call for projects process itself. It would be a subsequent dialogue that we would engage with you on. And the area that we're looking at maybe moving into it, that would be ITS again. There are outcomes that we want to see on a regional basis, and it may be more strategic for us to make an investment or commit funds to doing that on a regional basis, and allow entities to come and say, yep, I'm going to go on and commit to this piece of that investment, and our funds will help pay for the interconnection of signals and that kind of thing that might achieve the regional outcome that we're trying to get to. And same thing with incident management, which I know Jeff is going to cover a little bit. Again, there's funds that we may commit to up front, and you can participate on a later date. With that, I'm just going to pause. I don't think this thing works as a little mouse thing, so we can't quite visit the website, but it's just that same website that I should be linked to, and you just add /TIP to the end of it, and it's also linked on the left side of the page. You get to all the TIP information. You should actually be able to click right on that link. Oh, you're getting your slides up. Sorry. And lots of information there. Again, it's pretty dense, so by all means, give us a call and contact us if you have any questions.
Before we let Shelley speak, I just wanted to say that the Transportation Improvement Program is kind of an interesting acronym because it is the cutting edge of things. It's when we're committing money to actually implement projects and programs. There's a lot of homework that has to be done in advance of that. David called it due diligence. That sounded a lot simpler to me than what I've experienced. So we want to encourage you to talk to folks like us at the earliest opportunity so that we can help you understand the full roadmap. For example, if your project's on the state highway system, then we'll obviously need to be talking with TxDOT about what you want to accomplish there. And Mayor Royal can tell you how long it takes us to get money to a project sometimes, and it's often for reasons that have nothing to do with our good intentions. There's a railroad involved that can create another whole set of issues if we need to get agreements between local governments, that sort of thing. Altogether, we are programming this implementation money out over a window of time that's 4 or 5 years into the future. And typically, we need to have that project essentially ready to go at the front end because it takes a significant amount of time. If a project needs a major environmental finding, for example, that alone can be several years. I would say, though, that we have participated in what we call project development, some of these early stages, as well as project implementation. In part, it depends upon, you might have a critical piece to a much larger activity that we need to achieve. So again, just want to encourage you, talk to us. We'll get you in touch with the folks at TxDOT if you're not already talking to them, and help you lay out a path forward for that activity. With that, any questions right now, David? And I want to go right to Shelley and then on to our presentation on some other things. And I'll remind my staff that we're running into the last like 15 to 20 minutes of everything, so not to panic, but go ahead, Shelley, thank you.
Okay, I will just hit the high points. First of all, I would like to say that our boundaries for non-attainment in this area, and we are designated as non-attainment, which means we don't meet the ozone standard for this area, correspond right now directly with the MPO boundaries. However, if we add an additional county, that will not be the case, and that's not unusual. There are areas across the country that have different boundaries for the non-attainment area and for the Transportation Policy Council. So let me say that right up front, just because they join the Transportation Policy Council doesn't mean they become non-attainment. Well, I mean, it does worry people sometimes. But the non-attainment area is the same 8 counties that are non-attainment. And Typically, the emissions that contribute to the formation of low-level ozone, there are a number of them, and they're obviously industrial and some of our consumer, but also mobile sources. And the Transportation Policy Council, that's their responsibility for when the state develops an air quality improvement program or plan to get us into attainment. They ask for input from the local elected officials on what kind of commitments can be made. And it's through these commitments that they're a little different than they are on the stationary side because they have permits, but in our programs, they're voluntary. So a lot of times you'll see incentives that are offered for the programs in order to entice folks into participating in these programs. And these are a number of the strategies that we have implemented in this region for mobile sources. The COMMUTE Solutions Program is primarily targeting employers and employees. And our local governments, if they have a number of employees, they may want to implement these programs themselves, but oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with the smaller communities, they just kind of want to piggyback and help us promote and outreach for their citizens, because a number of you have citizens that live in your area and they may be driving to other areas. And so we ask that we have assistance in help promoting these type programs. And it's been quite successful, and some of our programs are some of the largest in the nation. And we couldn't do it without the help from our local elected officials.
Let me just mention that even though Metro Transit is a great partner with us, the activities Shelley is talking about are typically available whether or not you're in the Metro service area. So regional van pool program, although Metro is our operator, it is a full 8-county program. Anybody who lives in the 8-county area, even if they're commuting beyond the 8-county area, we have folks in Fort Bend County commuting out to Bay City where the nuclear plant is, for example. They can still take advantage of the van pool program. So I just wanted to mention that because some folks think that you can only participate if you're in the Metro service area, but it is a full 8-county.
For instance, if Wharton decides to join us, you only have to have one leg of your trip in the 8-county non-attainment area. So if they have citizens that live in Wharton County, or we do, for a fact, we have Matagorda citizens, residents, that come in for jobs into Brazoria or some of our other counties, and we have actually van pools that come in from those areas. The next program that we have is our Clean Cities program. This is a program that was been relatively small up until just the last 2 or 3 years. And with the natural gas exploration and findings that we've had in our areas and the economic bottom line and the impacts to our communities, there's a lot more interest from our local elected officials in participating. We also have plug-in stations that even some of our smaller cities and municipalities and entities have been interested in participating and locating those for their fleets, if for no other reason than to help them save on their fuel costs and their bills. So we find funding from a number of different sources where we can and try to help implement these type of programs. And this program here is probably one of the largest in the United States when you look at overall all of our projects. We have our fleet retrofit and replacement program. We get funding not only from the congestion mitigation air quality funding that Ashley and Alan had mentioned earlier, but we also have received a third-party grant from the Texas Emission Reduction Plan, the state funds, that we are actually fund local governments. So if you have, in that program, our CMAQ funds have typically been on-road vehicles, but if you have equipment that's off-road and that receives a lot of usage and it's fairly old, you are eligible to apply to that TERP program for funding, and we can evaluate it. And the difference in our program than if you went and applied to the state is that we hold your hand through the entire process. We do all the calculations, and we look at it because we don't want you to make a commitment that if you accept the funds and it's not getting enough usage that you have to go back and give the money back. So we try to really work with you and get as realistic projections as possible on the usage of these programs. And this one, we really do encourage the participation of our local governments And the Clean Vehicle Program, if any of you have programs, fleets that you operate, or even, for instance, in Sugar Land, they contract with the solid waste companies. Well, they've encouraged their companies, they haven't made them, but they've encouraged them to apply for that. So we have a number of solid waste haulers that the cities or municipalities have contracted with that are now coming in, and actually a number of them are looking at natural gas too. So that's been very popular because it not only helps clean up the environment, but it also saves money on the bottom line, because if any of you have had to purchase diesel in the last couple of years, you know how expensive it is, and the price has not been going down. So this is actually a money saver. On this program, we also encourage folks to participate in a voluntary idle reduction program. I think just about every one of our school districts have done that, and they've actually been able to go back and show how much money they've been able to save on their fuel bills, just implementing those types of projects. And at the same time, it is also cleaning up our air. I mentioned earlier that these programs are voluntary. It's voluntary in the sense that we can't mandate that someone carpool or take a bus or they drive a clean vehicle. But if we have, when we make these commitments, the bottom line is we have to be able to document these emission reductions in the state plan, which is signed off on by the Environmental Protection Agency. And so we actually have a quite aggressive plan in order to get folks to meet these reductions. And we recognize our good corporate citizens and our governmental entities that are voluntarily committed to these plans, and we promote them in the newspapers and recognize them and give them plaques and awards and everything we can to let them put, and we even have a little logo that they can show that they're a clean air champion. So they can even put that on their website too. So we're always encouraging more folks to do it. So if your entity hasn't participated yet, it's really pretty easy to be able to meet these commitments. And you don't have to come up with your own program. You can just participate in some of these other programs, or just promote it through our other programs to your citizens. And I've tried to make it as short as possible. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Now, the clean air program activities are one of those things where the door is always open. If you have something you think is an opportunity for participation, come talk to Shelley. It doesn't depend on a particular day of the week or month of the year. All right, now I want to, unless there's a question for Shelley, I want to move into a couple quick areas. We're going to talk about our planning work program a little bit, because that's where we can help you with planning activities in your community. And we take a very holistic approach, but we are looking at your goals for your community, what economic development or other outcomes you're looking to achieve, and how transportation can be part of the solution or the one of the building blocks for achieving what you want to do in your community. And then Jeff is also going to talk about a very specific program where we have creative funding opportunities, particularly from small governments, to participate in our DUI task force activity. So Jeff, I'm going to let you go right into it.
I'd love to, but according to Claude. So, I thought I had about 12 seconds.
I think you got about 10 minutes, Jeff.
Well, I've left a few copies of this on the table. This is our work program, and what this is essentially is a description of what the MPO has what it plans to do in regards to metropolitan transportation planning for the next 2 years. A lot of the other areas in the state, it's a one-year program. We do it for 2 years. And in a nutshell, this program starts in about a week, and it's going to go through September of 2015. And this reflects essentially everything that's been discussed today. This is all of our planning priorities. This is all the projects that we have intending to do over the next 2 years in regards to planning. This is not a program that involves specific implementation. This is not going to include what roads we're going to build. That's all in the TIP and the long-range plan. But this is all the planning program, all the studies that we're doing. It lists, basically, for all the studies such as the
access management studies, the sub-regional studies, local center studies. It'll show, you know, who is leading the effort, who is the primary funder of the effort, or the match entity, the general scope of what the project is, and also the budget for it. This document also serves as essentially our budget document for the next 2 years as well. And there's a bunch of figures in there. A list of the major activities that are going on in our area, in this plan specifically, they involve, for example, here's a partial list. It's we're trying to update just the information that goes into the TIP and the RTP. There are so many projects with so much data that's involved. We're trying to set up a database to capture this information. There's a variety of different studies, transit study in the Woodlands, several mobility plans, Montgomery, Fort Bend County. The 2040 RTP is perhaps our biggest project, since this is kind of the guiding document for us in terms of even what gets implemented in our TIP in the next 3 years. So this is one of the critical projects on our list. We've been involved in trying to develop an incident management program. It's something that is very critical, but it is not really available in our area, that if there's a stall or a wreck in the road, especially on the freeway, trying to get it off the road as fast as possible. You know, it's one thing that a law enforcement officer may come out in a half an hour and be able to address it. It needs to be faster than that, especially at 7 in the morning. Every minute pretty much delays traffic another 4. So the goal is to get things off the road as fast as possible. And this is one of the things we'll be looking at. There's also several very major projects going on. Some of these even funded by the state through what's called Rider 42, looking at interloop freeways in terms of how to improve them to improve the flow of traffic overall. Also, Interstate 45, US 59, very major projects that are coming through the Texas legislature, actually, and those are also reflected in here as well. This also shows and these are some of the activities that were not mentioned that we do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it involves the overall administration of this MPO. It also involves transportation modeling. We do a great deal of data collection, assessment of the system, and this is a lot of the information that goes into some of the determinations of projects that are going to occur in the future. And we do a lot of the other, like the operations, the TIP, bike ped planning, livable center planning, and some special studies. These are all included in this document. Feel free to take a copy and cruise through it and give you an idea of what is to go in there. If there's a project, potentially a planning item that you have interest in putting in here, this is where you would come, come talk to us, come talk to Alan or Ashby, and we can see how we can possibly incorporate it and try to find funding for it. That's a very general overview of this document. One of my many hats outside of accountant, agency accountant and operations guy is I also have been dealing with traffic safety over the last 6 years, actually 10 years, but really been working with it deeply for the last 6. And while we've done a variety of different initiatives, ranging from developing documentaries for teenagers, outreach to for child safety, especially with the new laws in place. One of the big initiatives we've been dealing with is a regional DWI task force. And this came out of basically the problem that about 300 people a year in our region die due to an alcohol-related incident. And it's a little over half of all fatalities in the area. I hate to get gruesome about it. Unfortunately, we have folks who go off to war and die on the battlefield. The battlefield is actually, we have a battlefield here, because there are more people dying on our roads here, and we don't quite blink an eye at it. And this is something that it was recognized this is the problem, especially Harris County is #1 in the country in terms of DWI fatalities. And that's not just a total number. If you look at all the big metropolitan areas, LA that has 3 times as many people, we top them, even in terms of the rate of DWI. So it is a significant problem here. And so what we've done is we've actually gone to TxDOT, and we applied for a grant such that we can go and, as a region, fight DWI. A lot of the bigger cities have grants that can do this. What they do is they fund overtime for patrols, and TxDOT gives them the funding for it. So the city, the county sheriff has one, I believe Pasadena has one. And so, but the smaller cities, you either don't necessarily have the force, the administrative capabilities. It's a little bit of a hassle on that end. So what we did is we applied for a grant where H-GAC would be the administrator. We deal with the paperwork and make it such that smaller cities can go out and enforce DWI. And we'll deal with the dirty work in terms of all the paper that goes with it. The way this program works.
If I want to ask something.
Sure.
We had the STEP program through the state, and they canceled it 2 years ago.
I'm pretty familiar with
Seabrook.
Seabrook.
Yeah, and we did have that to where now we actually fund an overtime pool of our own kind of STEP program for the officers that want to participate. But they killed it about 3 years ago, the program.
Well, actually,
I've been misinformed by my chief of police.
well, I will say that, yes, your Seabrook perhaps did have the arrangement. However, this grant is about to go in its second year. We're finishing up our first year, and you all have been a part of that first year's grant. So we have been funding.
I'll talk to you offline.
Oh, sure. But, this is just something that other agencies can be a part of. And the way it works is I have this money, officers go out, they work overtime, time and a half. The grant I have pays for the overtime. The way you all match it is you pay Social Security on the overtime wages, workers' comp, unemployment, and your officers rack up mileage on the cars as they go out and patrol. And that in itself serves as the match for the grant. And so it is a little bit of an expense, but we're putting folks out there that can help us out. Right now for 2014, our new grant is starting. We have 18 entities involved. I know Tomball's here. The folks that are not on here, Friendswood and Seabrook were part of my first year grant. If there's interest in being part of the second year, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to have you, and I have space. This operation works predominantly holiday weekends, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. We do the spring break trifecta, which is usually spring break, rodeo, and St. Patrick's Day. It's an unfortunate thing that people like to go out and get drunk that time, but if you're out to go get drunk, it's a good time to go do it. Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day. Essentially, you go out. There are about 2 or 3 day weekends, depending on the funding. You can do more. Shifts are predominantly at night, but there's a level of flexibility we've allotted for the officers to participate because we want the best officers available. And fortunately, but yet unfortunately, some of your best DWI officers operate on the weekends during the patrols. So for them to participate, they can't necessarily participate, but we can possibly make arrangements that they can operate at a slightly different time that they could take advantage of this opportunity. As of 4th of July, we made 175 DWI arrests and issued over 700 other citations for other infractions. There have been a variety of other infractions, but they're given out as warnings. And we're still waiting on Labor Day. I should have those results in a week. Our grant for the first year ends at the end of the month. We've been given another year. I'm going to begin processing those agreements. If there's anybody here who wants to participate, please let me know. I'll stick around. And this approach in terms of how we're handling this, because it could be used for other things besides DWI. If you have a speeding problem, we can look at expanding it, applying for grants for that as well. There's seatbelt enforcement. There's other enforcement opportunities out there. This is one of those things where, to have text, that this is something new, and it's different, and sometimes new and different is bad. So to go to an agency, and say, we want to do something new and different, and not just be told yes, but after saying that we're not sure if we can do that, them coming back and saying, no, we really want you to do this, and encouraging us to continue with this initiative, it speaks to the initiative. And I hope there will be year 3, 4, and 5. And hopefully, ideally, we'll have no more of this because we'll address the problem. But until then, it's going concern. I'll stick around afterwards if you have any questions. Hope you can participate. Thank you.
Mayor, that's the end of our presentations. I hope we stay close to our time. And I'm sure we didn't cover everybody's questions, but if anyone has a question or comment now, and the staff, like I said, we're going to stick around. We're glad to visit, or after you get back home, if you need the chief of police to give us a call, just have them give us a call. Same thing for your folks that manage your vehicle fleets, or if you're thinking about planning issues, you want your planning and zoning committee to give us a buzz. Whatever we can do to provide help to you. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know it was a tough morning to get here.
You ready for some questions?
Anything, Mayor? Questions?
I was curious on the UPWP portion. Do you track statistics on where the person became intoxicated or trends in terms of if it was from a club or a home?
I would love to do that in general. The problem is we don't get that partially because, one, you're incriminating yourself. Yes, I am. Most people don't say, yes, I was drinking at such and such bar. Usually the response is, no, I'm not drinking. And so that's why usually they got to take them in. Or even we've been involved also with a no refusal program where people will just flat out refuse to give a specimen, and there have been efforts throughout the area where basically if you refuse, you'll be taken in and get the blood sample drawn. Drums are not necessarily the most welcoming folks on that. So, but we could get, it'd be amazing what we could do if we could get that information.
Having said that, one tool we use here with all the crash information is to map out where those crashes are occurring. And just based upon that and the post-crash accident reports that your law enforcement people fill out, we have identified hotspot areas. A couple of years ago, a real brave person at TxDOT decided that she was going to put some signs up telling people this is a hotbed of DWI activity, and in a couple of locations TxDOT installed some signs that sort of said, gosh, we've had so many fatalities related to DWI in this area. So that's the closest we've got. And it wasn't intended to say that this is a bad establishment. And some of these locations are just where all of the restaurants and bars are located. I mean, you know that as good as we do in your community. But yeah, we have tried to do some of that. And law enforcement, when they set up the DUI or DWI locations, are looking at that data. They know this is a place where we are going to see more of them. So they are trying to use that.
Yeah, that's information we would love to have, because that could help.
By the way, it was mentioned several times that we do a lot of data collection. If you find yourself needing things like traffic counts, or if you want to know about crashes of whatever kind that might be in and around your community, we can give you that information.
A couple of things. One thing, I think the spring call for projects, that gives you 6 months if you've got something you want to get in. It's probably going to take quite a bit of time, so you better get working on it. And the idea of bundling, I think, needs to be pushed. And I think that's a message here. If you've got something you think you want done, start checking with either David or whoever and find out if there's some other cities that you can partner with to get the funding through. And the other thing I want to impress on you is that this is a long-term process. You're not going to jump in here in March and have something ready to go. and you're not gonna get it next summer. So, you gotta be thinking real long-term on these projects. And I don't get that. People I talk to don't get that message, so.
Good point.
Somehow that's gotta be out there, that we're not talking quick stuff here.
Yeah.
The other thing, I want you to take my card, I want to hear from you. Let's assume I'm going to do this again next year. What would make it better next time, please? So that we can get more cities and actually do some good for them. That's all I've done.
Mayor, I just wanted to conclude by saying that our policy council normally meets in this room at 9:30 on the fourth Friday of the month. The schedule's out on our website. Our next meeting is going to be a week from today. And if you want to see how this sausage gets made, as they say, you're very welcome to join us at the policy council. But the other reason for coming would be to see your fellow elected officials from the other communities. They don't have to be next door. This bundling idea, I'm going to tell you, is a new idea, just like Jeff 2 years ago was sitting here figuring out how to help smaller communities participate in DWI. We're trying to figure out how we can help get some of this federal money to smaller cities that maybe only have one bad intersection, but maybe their neighbor has another bad one, or maybe someone across the county has another bad one. We want to try to see what doors we can knock down and help you all get some funding for those.
With that, we're done?
We are. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.